So the business development process has really changed a lot over the last couple of decades. In fact, I'd say it's changed a lot in the last decade. One of the biggest changes has actually been in the amount of attention that we have as consumers. It used to be back in the day, if the phone rang, we'd pick it up. We didn't know who was on the other end, but we had the time and the luxury to talk to her that was. These days, because there's so much information coming at us so quickly and so often, we really have to be very specific about what we let in. So if we look at that from the business development point of view, me just reaching out and dialing for dollars like we used to back in the day just doesn't work. It used to be that you would look at the percentage of people that said yes versus no when you called. These days it's the percentage of people that actually pick up the phone, which is very minuscule. So I think a couple things come into play. One is the power of recommendations and the power of referrals. Whether that's an official referral from a client or just from a networking partner, somebody that you know, whenever you can drop that name, whenever you have a warm introduction, you're much more likely to have success. And so I think that's really a key thing that we have to look at when building business is how do I develop and cultivate relationships with people who can introduce me? Because what we do is we coattail on that person's credibility when we get a warm introduction, right? You might not know me, but if Bill Smith, who's a good friend of yours, says, hey, give David a few minutes, you're much more likely to do that. And I think that's probably the biggest shift that we're seeing. So communication platforms have really shifted a lot in the last 20 years, and that has had a huge impact on building a book of business now. Again, if we go back to, let's say, 30 years ago, communication platforms meant the phone and snail mail, and that was it. Everybody got excited, and I'm sure you remember when there was a fax machine. Holy cow, I can fax a real piece of paper. That's amazing. We have so many different platforms now, whether it's email, whether it's texting, instant messaging, all of the various social media platforms. This has done two things. One is it's opened up a lot of possibilities, but it's also overwhelmed us. And so one of the things that I often suggest is looking at the ways that your customers or your prospective customers, your clients, the people that you want to interact with, how do they want to be connected with? And really become an expert in those. It might be texting, it might be Facebook, it might be LinkedIn, it might be Twitter. If you were going after the teenage market these days, it'd be Instagram because they love that. And by the way, in about 5 years, all of those names will be different. So that evolution is going to be an important component moving forward. And I think that whatever platforms you're using now, they're going to change. And it's just a matter of being in step with that change. There's a really big outlook shift, a mindset shift that financial professionals have to make right now to really take advantage of the new environment that we're in. And I say that it's a shift from thinking linearly to non-linearly. And it used to be that when we were building a book of business, we'd have a call sheet, we'd have 50 referrals or 100 people on a list that we could call, and we were trying to get X percentage of them to meet with us and then get X percentage of sales, etc. The world we live in is not linear anymore. It's much more amorphous. I always say that building a network and building relationships is like a cloud. And what we want to do is continually put energy into that cloud so that things can come out of it. And the more energy we put in, the more that will come back. But it's not going to be in a direct one-to-one way. I think that a lot of times we forget that, hey, we might put some energy into some relationships over here, but we might see the benefit actually over here. And it might be obvious and it might not be, and that's okay. But it is hard for us sometimes to wrap our heads around that. And especially if we are expecting that linear path and we don't see it, we get frustrated. And I've seen financial professionals say this all the time. Networking doesn't work. I don't get anything from it. And then I look at where their business is coming from. And they're like, oh, he was referred to this person who knew this person. They were golf buddies, and it was actually from my sister-in-law. And you're like, hey, that's networking. So even though it's not as clear for us to see, it is just as, and I think these days even more powerful than any other linear path that we can take. So when financial professionals, especially ones that are starting out, are asking me, how do I really get my head around networking? How do I really approach this the right way? What are the things to do? I always point them to a couple key foundational ideas. The first is that this is relational. This is going to take time. Networking is not transactional. If people think that networking is going to a networking event and getting 10 business cards and giving out 10 business cards and that's a success, no. It really is about how do I develop a relationship over time with this individual? How do I develop trust and credibility and make them want to engage with me, and not only as a professional but as a person, because I know then that professional success will come. And to that point, it's really about finding ways to provide value for your network. Sometimes that's going to be very obvious. You can provide services, you can provide advice or ideas. But sometimes there's other ways of providing value. It could be just in connecting other parts of your network together. One of the most powerful things that I've found for myself personally, and a lot of people that I know who are very successful, is the idea of connecting different parts of their network, not expecting or looking for any compensation for that, but just saying, hey, you're a great person, I think there's some synergy here, go. And it's amazing when you keep doing that, what starts coming back. I believe strongly in networking karma, right? So whatever you put into the world is going to come back to you. And I think it's also really about listening a lot. It's one of the most overused and under-listened to pieces of advice, right? It's just to stop talking and listen. I think that a lot of people don't like to start networking relationships or are nervous about networking because they're not good at meeting new people and they're uncomfortable. And that's meeting a new person's an awkward situation for most of us. But if you really look at it, hey, I just have to show up, I have to be present, ask some questions, and then listen and really find out about the other person, it gets really easy and very powerful because we all like those who pay attention to us. We're all looking to be able to share our stories with other people. And so those are some of the kind of basic foundational ideas. Look at it as a long-term process, provide value for your network, sometimes outside of like the regular ideas of what your service is, and then just listen. And you do those three things. Even if you're not quite sure what you're doing, you're going to be successful.